A single American Nimitz-class aircraft carrier displaces 100,000 tons of water, carries dozens of strike fighters, and houses thousands of sailors. It's a floating city capable of projecting force anywhere on Earth in a matter of days. And military hardware is just the visible edge of that power. The global economy trades on the US dollar, and the literal headquarters for international diplomacy sits right in the middle of Manhattan. It's hard to imagine now, but for the first 140 years, the United States wanted absolutely nothing to do with this kind of global dominance. The original blueprint for the country included a strict instruction from George Washington: trade with everyone, but steer completely clear of permanent, entangling alliances with foreign nations. Two vast oceans made it incredibly easy to ignore Europe's problems. But the massive, industrialized bloodshed of the 20th century shattered that geographic shield, forcing the country into a total reversal of its founding philosophy. When American troops broke their isolation to enter World War I, their industrial might broke the stalemate. Millions celebrated the victory in the streets, and President Woodrow Wilson tried to parlay that military win into a permanent diplomatic system called the League of Nations, designed to prevent another conflict. But lawmakers in Washington balked. Congress outright rejected the treaty, choosing to pull the country entirely out of international commitments. Troops, ships, and capital were rapidly pulled back across the Atlantic. The U.S. decided its job was done and went home. Without American financial backing or diplomatic weight, post-war Europe cratered. Economies collapsed under crushing war debt, leading to hyperinflation so severe that citizens used worthless currency as children's building blocks. That specific economic desperation created a fertile breeding ground for extreme militarization, allowing fascist regimes to rise directly from the wreckage. The retreat of the 1920s proved a brutal point. When the world's largest industrial power abruptly vacates the global stage, it leaves a vacuum that gets filled by something much worse. So when World War II inevitably dragged America back into the fighting, Washington didn't repeat the mistake of packing up and leaving in 1945. The fighting had reduced major European cities to ash and rubble, completely erasing decades of infrastructure and industry. Meanwhile, the American mainland hadn't seen a single bomb. By the war's end, U.S. industrial output had skyrocketed, leaving it as the only functioning superpower on the planet. Recognizing they couldn't afford another catastrophic withdrawal, American leaders made a calculated pivot. They decided to stay. They pumped billions of dollars directly into rebuilding foreign markets through the Marshall Plan, intentionally stabilizing democratic governments and restarting trade. To secure those investments against Soviet expansion, they formed NATO, locking the United States into a permanent military alliance across the Atlantic. And to guarantee they had a firm grip on global diplomacy, they anchored the newly formed United Nations directly on U.S. soil. Instead of simply claiming a military victory, the U.S. systematically built a new global architecture for trade and defense, placing itself permanently at the center. This proactive stance kicked off what became known as the American Century, a period where the U.S. served as the main guarantor of international trade routes and security pacts. Look at the map. In 1914, American military forces were practically non-existent overseas. By 1950, a sprawling network of bases covered the globe. This massive footprint wasn't a historical accident. It was a deliberate, highly expensive insurance policy bought after the bitter lessons of the 1930s. But decades later, the visceral memory of those total wars is fading, and the heavy financial and political costs of maintaining that global network are wearing on the American public. Now, the shifting political rhetoric is increasingly echoing the very same kind of strict isolationism that George Washington once demanded. The 20th century provided a clear, brutal demonstration of what happens when America steps away from the world stage. The only question now is if a new generation is willing to risk paying that price again.